Hi, it's Friday, so we're going to start reading Once Upon a Dream again for Fairy Tale Fridays. We left Sasha and Cecily ready to go to school last week. Sasha had a nightmare. She was really upset about her past. Cecily was upset because her father is dating Madame Morgana, who is awful with her daughters. And so we're going to pick up from there. So, chapter 2. The village of Turin was set in the valley, just east of the great mountains that separated the kingdom of Rylak from Lonstus. Turin, being part of Lonstus, was ruled by the benevolent and much celebrated Charming family, and had been so for generations, just as Rylak had been ruled by Roses. Surrounded by dense forests, vibrant meadows, and an abundance of lakes and rivers, Turin was a beautiful Tudor-style village. Various stories disagree on the actual reasoning, but despite its small size, Turin was a prominent and well-known village. Now, some say it was the loss of the idiot, while others insist it was the wishing well in the center square. It tapped into some magical ever-after stream. Some even believe it was the neighborhood watch and a strong aesthetic sport. But for whatever the reason, Turin was the holiday home of the Charming family, and that placed it firmly on the map. Although all roads in Turin were made of cobblestone, it was only the red ones that led to the town square. By day, traveling merchants displayed their wares, such as exotic spices, freshly cut fish, fresh fruit, and Cece's favorite, imported fabrics. At night, lovers, young and old, alike congregated in the square to stroll through the fragrant gardens and whisper sweet words beneath what seemed almost a magical moon. But the true heart of that square was the wishing well. Legend said that a sincere and selfless wish, spoken from an honest heart, no matter how improbable, would always come true. For years, teenagers had been making wishes for this person or that person to like them, but as these were not truly selfless wishes, they were destined to fail. Adults, not desiring to waste time on a fickle well, consulted fairies, gypsies, and in some cases, even sorcerers. But magic was never a guaranteed success with regards to the matters of the heart. The legend had never been proven either way. Still, it was a very pretty well. Now, that particular morning, it wasn't the exotic spices, the infamous well, or even the fresh fruit vendors that caused the girls to be late for school. It was the newly arrived fanciful fabrics vendor. It had caught Cece's eye, and she was currently winning her haggle over the price of rose-colored satin. Cecily Van Holstein knew in her heart one day she would be a celebrated designer, with couture houses across the lands and a street named after her in the capital city of Crystalise. Crystalise was, of course, home to the wealthiest and best dressed people of all majors and origins across the kingdom. If Turin had a season, that being when the Charming family was in residence during great balls, then Crystalise was one big, never ending season. Having won her haggle and feeling very pleased with her deal, Cece caught Sasha's hand and dashed up to the schoolhouse as fast as their not so sensible shoes would allow. Before she could enter the schoolhouse, Sasha had the indisputable and distinct feeling of being watched. She spun around quickly, just swiftly enough to catch a very tall, muscular boy with longish dark hair immediately avert his eyes, but not so swift as to avoid a flash of eye contact. His light brown eyes, flecked with green and gold, were very unusual and quite beautiful, but that wasn't what had caught her attention so immediately. It was the way he moved. He was fluid. He moved in a sleek, dangerous way that suggested he was unlike other boys. She knew in that moment that he was not human. Sasha could not keep herself from staring at the boy with the beautiful eyes. She had never been this close to a creature before. Rylak had become exceptionally strict in its policy of segregation. All non-humans were kept far from any and all cities and castles. Socializing between species was non-existent in Rylak, although the aristocracy of most kingdoms held a very dim view of any fraternization, and more than one reputation had been ruined beyond repair. Even Turin, where segregation was not enforced, held few, if any, non-humans. Unless, of course, one counted the crones of Turin, which one rarely did. For truly, all they cared for was bingo and wine and sugar packet stealing. The boy turned back, and with an infectious grin, he winked and sprinted out of sight. Sasha felt the blush spread across her cheeks. Oh, now he was really cute. Do you know him? Please said you know him so you could introduce him to me and I could sweep him off my feet with my effervescent charm. Cece sighed and she stared after the boy in question. Nope. Sasha slowly shook her head. Not even a little. Although she wished she did. She appeared so human. She wonders what he really was. Cece stared after the long-gone boy for a moment. Was he looking at you or me? You know, I think he might have been looking at me. Sasha laughed, and she steered her friend into the schoolhouse door. We can only wish. The boy had run off so fast, she hadn't had the opportunity to discover whom he in truth had been watching. It happened in an instant. However, Sasha was clear on 3 things. 1, the boy with the beautiful eyes had been watching someone intently. 2, this boy was most certainly not human. And 3, he was also most certainly trouble. She had a feeling they had not seen the last of him. Miss Sasha Louise Rutherford, announced Miss Hollyhock, teacher extraordinaire. Though lacking in the barest fundamentals of humor as she looked over her notes, Louise was the name Uncle Doc had given Sasha when he adopted her. It was a nod to the boy's mother, and for her part, Sasha felt like she liked being named after their mother. It made her feel like she was truly accepted as part of their family, and Sasha desperately needed family. Her own had tried to assassinate her. This is the second time this week that you and your sidekick, a certain Miss Cecily Dawn Van Holstein, have arrived late for morning class. Do you have anything to say in your defense, or shall I simply hand down the penalty? Miss Hollyhock, despite her flowers and cupcake name, ruled with an iron glove. She had eyes in the back of her head and uncanny hearing. Even the boys sat up straight when she turned her laser-like gaze on them. Cece had suspicions of cyborg origins, or perhaps a distant relation to the dreaded Moana Morgana, but Sasha simply tried to stay off her radar. A near impossible task when your best friend was a Van Holstein. Anything? The teacher queried without looking up. I'm not the sidekick, Cece announced with a toss of her golden curls. Sasha groaned and sunk deeper in the chair. Excuse me? Miss Hollyhock looked up from her notes with a look that would have caused any reasonable person to wither where they stood. Any reasonable person aside from Miss CCUV, that is. I said I'm not the sidekick. Cece blew a straight curl up her face. Just because Sasha's taller than me doesn't automatically mean she's my leader. We're 50-50 with everything. We don't do the boss thing. We're equals. Thank you for clarifying that for me, Miss Van Holstein. The teacher nodded with a malice-laced smile. In that case, I'm sure you will not mind accompanying Miss Rutherford this evening to the Lonesome Forest with today's lesson. Cece's face fell. A look of horror replaced humor, and Sasha looked confused. The voice in the back snickered. Excuse me, Miss Hollyhock, why exactly am I taking the lessons to the Lonesome Forest? Sasha inquired as politely as she could. Very few people ventured into the forest willingly, and Sasha had still had flashbacks of her near-death collapse in the depths of the forest where Uncle Doc had stumbled upon her. Penance, the teacher flashed a wider smile. Our newest student is stricken with Hogla's disease, is unable to leave her tower. You and Miss Van Holstein will bring me and explain the day's lessons until I say further. She announced this, very relieved to have delegated the unsavory task. Sasha had never heard of Hogla's disease. It didn't sound particularly good, and she hoped it wasn't communicable. Miss Hollyhock, Sasha questioned, what exactly is Hogla's disease? Excuse me? Torrin's one and only teacher rarely found herself questioned, and almost never from a student. She found she quite disliked it. She glared at the offending student as she searched for an appropriate answer. Hogla's disease. Right, Hogla's disease. I've never heard of it, continued Sasha, who, under such a gaze, fought to sit straight. I'm concerned it might be communicable. Flustered and unimaginably irritated, the teacher shuffled through her papers. Well, it has, Miss Rutherford, I have been informed that it's not communicable. It poses no threat to my students. If you have any further medical questions, I suggest you direct them to Mr. Rutherford, as we are already quite behind on today's lessons. I'm sure you will all understand why we will be kept late this afternoon to make up for this unfortunate and unnecessary delay. The room was suddenly filled with groans, which were immediately silenced by the dark look of the furious and unusually embarrassed teacher's eyes. The entire schoolroom turned their ire towards the dynamic duo. But it was only Sasha who noticed. Cece's eyes did not stray from the forbidden tabloid hidden deep in her schoolwork. Saying there were roads through the lonesome forest might be somewhat of an overstatement. One could say there were paths, dark, twisty, and overgrown, paths of a sort. You see, even the glorious rays beaming down from the brilliant afternoon sun fought to find their way through the dense foliage. How aptly named! Snow idly mused as she observed the dark and mysterious forest before her. With great care, the girls picked their way through the dimly lit trail, Sasha in her knee-length white boots, and Cece in those fragile silver slippers. They were, as you can imagine, quite slow. Only the most courageous of the most eccentric would dare to make their home anywhere near the lonesome forest, and few ventured beyond the point where the sun changed from shining rays to pale slivers. The depths of the forest was said to be home to trolls, vampires, various non-unionized fairies, and witches, but if those legends were true, there were also sleeping dryads resting deeply within the dark and silent trees. The dryads had long since ceased dancing in the moonlight. The ancient texts held stories of great celebrations in the forest, magical nights inspired by joy and reverence the dryads had held for all life. Of all she had collected, the dancing dryads were Sasha's most beloved myth. Often she would daydream that she was dancing, hands joined and hair swaying in the breeze, as if she was one of her dryads, and she would imagine they had accepted her as one of their own. She sighed softly, as it held nothing more than a fantasy now. The same legend that spoke of the dryads and their dance also held their demise. Humans. Humans had hunted the dryads, driven by belief that cutting a dryad down in her as she emerged from her tree would bestow her magic upon whomever was quick enough to catch her. For such a desire, thousands of dryads had been sacrificed, although no human had been blessed with her magic. And as to whether the dancing dryads are myth or tragedy, none could confirm or deny, but there were a great many trees in the forest that held the appearance of sorrow. Those surviving the tragedy had retreated to the lonesome forest and slept their sleep in silence. Though tales were still told of remnant dryads pledged to torment any who dared disturb their slumber. Regardless, the trees kept their secrets, and the silence surrounded them. Only mystery remained. The trees grew sparse as they entered the clearing. Before them was a small gray stone cottage, a tall and narrow tower to the side. Sinister, the house appeared. All greenery fled from the clearing as if frightened by the cold, dark stone, or perhaps what lay within. Today we're going to do this in 2 sections because I've written quite a lot this week, so this will be part 1. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.